stance throughout his near 42 years in power, but he's always made sure people are aware of their tribal identities. But now it seems he has already lost control of much of the east of the country, including Libya's second city, Benghazi. And analysts say he never managed to fully consolidate his power here anyway. His son has warned of civil war.
Libya is not Tunisia or Egypt. Libya is tribes, clans and alliances. Libya doesn't have a civil society and political parties. It will be a civil war and we will kill each other on the streets.
Many experts fear Gaddafi may now appeal to some smaller tribes to stay loyal to him, and he will supply them arms. He is already accused of bringing in mercenaries from other African states and elsewhere. Elements within the military have already swapped sides. Gaddafi has vowed to fight on, but as the little support he had among some tribes dissolves, his methods for securing political survival are becoming increasingly desperate. Charles Stratford, AlJazeera.
Let's talk to Ibrahim Jibril, Libyan political activist. You saw him there in Charles Stratford's report. Ibrahim, first of all, the situation on the ground in Libya. We'd known for some days that cities in the east appeared to be under the control of the protesters. Now we hear that Misrata, only about 100 k's away from Tripoli itself, and to the west of Tripoli, may well have fallen into the hands of the protesters. How important do you think that is?
Significantly important. We should point out that the cities that have been completely under the control of the Libyan people extend all the way to beyond Benghazi, west of Benghazi to Jdabia, and then with some depth in the south. So cities like Jalo and other cities in the south, still within the east part, are all under the control of people. Misrata is the same, Zawiya is the same, Zintan was the first place, for example, to actually be totally under the control. And these are all in the west. So what is happening today is that we're seeing that the only area that is not completely under the control of the people are the barracks, the Bab al-Aziziyya barracks within the city of Tripoli. So,
this is where we saw Gaddafi, was it?
Speaking yesterday.
Was this the compound that was bombed in 1986?
That's exactly right.
Which is why you still see the bullet marks on the walls.
He's maintained it, he says that he maintains it as a museum.
Because one of his children was killed, his adopted daughter. Okay, so he says. Now, if and when Gaddafi no longer has a grip on any kind of power, who's going to run Libya?
You mean more like when than if at this point in time?
I'm sorry, if.
These things, the situation in Libya today, for example, is very fluid and very dynamic. The things that people all are in agreement on today is it is like when you take the oath as a doctor, first do no harm. First, remove this malignant tumor that is there today. Remove it out of the body. Second, then things will evolve. What is happening on the streets today, what is happening on the grounds in Libya, is that people are getting organized. There are committees being organized. Benghazi, for example, is being cleaned, spotlessly cleaned today. The streets, the garbage, everything. Very reminiscent of what happened in Midan al-Tahrir in Cairo. When everything subsided, the first thing people did was they cleaned all the square.
All right, let me put it another way. In Egypt, since you bring it up, there was a military council there that took over. If the army in Libya is no longer loyal to Gaddafi and Gaddafi goes, is it possible in that country that there could be some kind of military government for a while that would satisfy the people?
The military in Libya is not, the role of the military in Libya is not the same as it is in Egypt. In Egypt, obviously, the leadership throughout Egypt in all institutions is pretty much military. Libya is not the same. Secondly, Gaddafi doesn't really trust the formal military institution, and that's why he has these security brigades and so on that he surrounds himself with. So, can the military form a council and step in? I guess theoretically there is potential for that. Is that likely to happen? I doubt it.
Well, as you say, we have to wait and see, although you believe it's going to be when rather than if.
I'd say.
Ibrahim Jibril, thank you. Thanks very much indeed. One of the effects of everything that's happening in Libya, which produces 2% of the world's oil, is that production is now down by a quarter, according to the news agency Reuters. Companies there shutting down operations, and mostly foreign companies, due to the unrest in Africa's third biggest producer of oil. And it looks like oil prices are rising too. The futures contracts for the benchmark Brent crude went over $107 a barrel on Wednesday and hitting a two-year high on Monday at $108.70. Well, since the Tunisian president was overthrown on January the 14th, oil prices have gone up by $10. Nick Spicer reports.
The numbers are changing as fast as the events in the Arab world. Western consumers are concerned at gas prices rising as the Tunisian, Egyptian and Libyan peoples rise against their rulers.
No matter what you're pumping these days, diesel, premium or unleaded, you're likely going to be getting an extra dose of market fear, uncertainty and higher prices, dangerous to the global economy and to the world's poor and hungry.
The world produces around 85 million barrels of oil every day. OPEC countries produce around 35% of that. Saudi Arabia pumps out just over 1/10 of the total number. Libya sends 85% of its oil to Europe, but it produces only 2% of global output. Still, the events in Libya could produce a dramatic change in the oil numbers if there's a political domino effect.
It might go to the Persian Gulf. It might affect the major producers. The kingpin is Saudi Arabia with 8 million barrels per day oil production, and that is just impossible to substitute, impossible to balance the world oil supply demand if that happens.
One problem, if revolution spreads, could be a slowdown in foreign investment in developing countries, say the analysts.
The weakest and the poorest of the across the planet really do not have the resources to support them when there's a downturn. That is, they cannot self-insure in a meaningful way the way rich countries can. In that sense, they're vulnerable, much more vulnerable to the ups and the downs of the international business cycle.
More possible trouble in the months to come. If gas prices stay high, farmers in the developing world will have to spend more money on gasoline and so less on food for their families. Showing that Libya may not be just a matter for the oil-hungry West, but for the whole world. Nick Spicer, AlJazeera, Berlin.
Right, let's find out what you've been sending in to us. Here's Nazanin Sadri.
Thanks, David. Well, it's been a busy day on online chatter. Things have really picked up over the last few hours, both in terms of tweets as well as video footage. Let's start by taking a look at what's been said on Twitter. Ali tweets, "They tell me Tripoli is ours and we will not fall into Gaddafi's trap. He wants us to separate, but we are Libyan and Tripoli is Benghazi." Another blogger writes, "Protesters in Tripoli have said they will continue protesting because they will die anyway if this revolution is not successful." And an update posted recently by Flybirdies, who's in the country, says, "I went out this morning, fear is everywhere. Most of the shops are closed, school, universities without students." It goes on, SMS from Libyan phone telling all people to go back